Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of Unmasking. And we are so excited. We have a very special guest. We hinted at it last week that all of our SMU peeps would be excited this week because we have Dr. Ruzgyte with us, and she's going to kick off our conversation on intimacy. And so before we get started with her, I just want to read her bio so you can familiarize yourself with who she is. She holds such a special place in mine and Sarah's hearts because she was actually our first professor at SMU in our graduate school program. And so Dr. Edita Ruzgyte, I've been practicing that so much. I just call her Dr. R.
Dr. R.
Dr. R. She's a sex, couples, and marriage therapist, licensed professional counselor, supervisor, and AASECT certified sex therapist. She is currently a professor of counseling and family therapy in the Graduate School of Southern Methodist University. After coming to the United States from Lithuania, received her PhD in family therapy. In her dissertation, she explored the cultural and social aspects of relationships and sexuality. In addition to her work in university and private practice, she trains professionals at various workshops and conferences in the US and other countries, such as Italy, China, Armenia, and Australia. She also returns to Lithuania periodically to train native psychologists and family therapists. She now gives seminars and does therapy in the English, Lithuanian, and Russian languages. So just super impressive, well-studied, and she is an amazing person. So thank you for being here with us, Dr. R.
Yes, we're so excited. We're going to talk about sex with Dr. R. It's going to be
I'm having a full circle moment over here because never in my wildest dreams did I think I would be walking into my first graduate school class with my professor and then 8 years later having her on our podcast. So it's really kind of cool.
Here you go. And I get to celebrate your successes, your careers, which is fun to do.
Well, we
couldn't be here without you, Dr. R. You are the absolute best. And I think the first thing we just want to know is, to share with our listeners a little bit more about your background and how you came to really want to focus on sexuality and intimacy and relationships, like what really drove you to that. So if you don't mind just sharing with our listeners a little bit about your story.
So part of my story, I believe in systems. I believe in circular causality. So there is not one event that led me to be where I am. I grew up in Soviet Union. I grew up in the place where we didn't talk about couples. We didn't talk about sex. Sex in general was a taboo. And I came to United States totally by accident. In general, like if there is one theme about my life, it's like I always say, it's like, on my tombstone, it will be written, she never said no. Yes, I'll always try no to opportunity. She never said no to opportunity. Let's put it this way. I'll always try something at least once. It just like that's just how it is. So that's how I came to United States. Yes, someone said, "Why don't you come?" It's like, okay, let's do it. And I had a sociology degree in Lithuania. So for me, the concept of relationships, the concept of interaction, the concept of humans, it was always very fascinating. People in general were messy. We're complicated. Yeah. We are self-involved. We don't want to. We try to pretend that we are something different than we are because we ourselves don't like who we are. So when we don't like who we are and then we connect to someone else who they don't know who they are, it's difficult. It's like, and I grew up in the country where your needs were not important. Your needs were, as long as you serve the country, as long as you sacrifice yourself, you basically, the concept was that you get fulfilled by being part of something, which is not the case. So I think it kind of was both spontaneous and natural. I have always been around relationships and I saw relationships. And then there was such a void. There was such a void on talking about relationships. And sex, it really never was. It was my mentor who asked, it's like when I looked in dissertation, what to do dissertation, I don't like writing. And I thought it would be very boring. So it's like, well, take sex. Sex will never be boring. thought he was joking. He was not joking. I took it, and here we go 20 years later. It's like this is kind of a trend, a career. When I went to the first sex therapy conference, I didn't even know that sex therapy exists.
Yeah.
I was taught by the person who was not a practitioner. So I didn't even know that this whole group of people exist. And I went there and I got so fascinated. And it was like a little clique of people who looked deviant in every other situation where they are at. So it was like my group. And so that's kind of, it's like, again, it was the combination both of natural and spontaneous events that kind of led me to that.
That's so cool. I can't imagine a sex therapy conference. I think that would be probably a fun time. Yeah. Like just like the topics, everything. I mean, the people, because everybody's probably extremely like open and unmasked and just who they are. And I imagine that that's very just cool to be around because like you said, everything is so like shut down a lot of times for, like you don't talk about this as women, like you have to be a certain way. And so to be in a room full of people talking about something that we all have experienced or hope to experience or be a part of, that's probably very freeing.
Sarah, that's a good way to put it. It's like actually we all have a relationship with sexuality. Even if it is non-existent, it's still a relationship. And so one of the things that I noticed about people in the sex therapy conference, yes, they were much more open among themselves, yet each of them, one way or another, somehow experienced the alienation or some discrimination, some kind of like I remember the chair of the department that I was, not in our university but prior, when I was going to that conference, he actually says like, no, be careful, there are strange people there.
Oh, okay.
Wow. And which is when we look at someone who is different, or it's like we use the words weird, strange, we're afraid of something different,
of what we don't.
But that's systems.
Yeah. Also, too, I can imagine, and maybe you can speak a little bit more on this. I can imagine that shame plays a role in intimacy challenges and things like that. And I'm wondering your perspective growing up in the Soviet Union and then coming to America. What are some things that you noticed right away about just shame and sexuality?
One of the things that I noticed coming here, yes, shame plays a big role. Shame plays a big role, and shame is then connected to vulnerability. And then this whole concept of once someone see me, they cannot unsee me.
Yeah.
Sometimes we ourselves, Cindy, Sarah, sometimes we ourselves do not like what we are attracted to. We feel what we are excited by. We have internal conflict ourselves. I worked with clients who are extremely, extremely religious. And I had one client who literally, she chose to be a nun because she knew it was very clear to her that she liked same sex. She was attracted to the same sex. And in her mind, she said, it's like, I will not, that's my solution. My solution to my attraction is creating the context within which I will minimize my temptation.
Wow.
Is she right? Is she wrong? Is it up to us to decide? And so here is one of the things it's not what you're asking, but I'm kind of jumping into one thing. We can see where you can take me from there. We treat sex differently than we treat anything else in our lives or in lives with other people. And somehow it's not only I don't like it or I am uncomfortable. It's I don't like it, I'm uncomfortable, and therefore you should not be doing it. Or therefore what you're doing is wrong.
Okay.
So for example, if I am very adamant about promoting people self-expression, and if you like if you have same-gender attraction, this is something you have to promote. That may be difficult for me to accept my client where they are. Yes, I am at awe for someone to make a decision, to change their life permanently, and she's committed to it, and she's finding happiness in it. It's not up to me. But if I am feeling, it's like, here it is. If I have not worked through my internal conflict about something, I will be projecting all kinds of things on her.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's difficult for people to conceptualize or to go into sex therapy or conceptualize what sex therapy is. It's because we all have something that we're not comfortable with, either within ourselves or with other people. Not any different than we have about the way we have relationship with our nutrition, the relationship that we have with our body's improvement. Yes, Cindy, we talked about your grandfather. Your grandfather he was in his 80s, 90s when he rode a bicycle.
Yeah.
For him, his relationship with his body, with health, with supporting young people, he had a very solid relationship and very congruent relationship. Would you say so?
Yes.
With sexuality, not only we may not have a congruent relationship, we don't even know how to start having a relationship. Some of us don't even know that there is such a thing that let's have a relationship about it. Let's talk about it. Yes, we grew up in the society where sex is nasty, ugly, and dirty. Don't talk about it. Save it for the one you love.
Yeah.
And then let's just close our eyes and keep our fist, clench our fist, and let's make sure that it will happen.
Yeah. Okay.
Like without asking, what is it that we want to happen?
That is true. And I feel like the secular part of things and this, it's can kind of ruin a lot of like how we perceive things. So like when it comes to religion, people put so much of their own opinions on things or what they think in society, how people are supposed to be, how they're supposed to behave. There's such a double standard for men and women as well. Even to this day, you're out of wedlock and you have children or, and we're trying, I think, as a society to get better with that. But you still have, like you said, a lot of people who are very uncomfortable with that topic. And they've been conditioned from a very young age that this is acceptable, this is not acceptable. So then the shame sets in. So it's a very dark place, I think, to be when it comes to sexuality and being comfortable in it. And Cindy and I talk all the time, but I feel like as women, especially women in our 40s, when your body's changing everything, you start getting more accepting of your own sexuality and what you want out of life. But it's still hard because at the end of the day, we all want to be accepted, right? Nobody wants to feel rejected or weird or different. That's just human nature. And so I think a lot of it is the secular part of things too, kind of, puts a damper on talking about things that we really should be talking about that are not bad things. This is the human life and it's a joyful thing. And I mean, I think that's what I'm trying to say is it can just get very uncomfortable quickly because we've been so conditioned, and especially in America compared to going to France or Europe, somewhere else where there's more access to it, like nude beaches. There's people are more comfortable in their bodies, but then there's other parts of the world, including America, where it's still we're set in a very different mind frame when it comes to sexuality and men versus women and double standards and all of those different things. I don't know if that kind of goes into
Sarah, shame. And actually I'll add one word that can kind of summarize what you said. I would say from what I'm seeing in the United States, but in many other places, we're afraid of pleasure.
Very true, yeah.
And we're especially afraid of sexual pleasure.
It's kind of hedonistic, or it's been taught to us that it's hedonistic.
And societies are afraid. So for example, the more controlling the society, the first thing that society controls is sexuality.
Well, that is true.
That's when so part of my dissertation was looking at the sexuality pre and post Soviet Union. In Soviet Union, even as a medical doctor, you had to get permission to go to the library to study reproductive and sexual anatomy.
Really?
Wow.
Clitoris mutilation is happening it's still happening.
Yeah.
But the idea is when a person is happy, when a person feels pleasure, when they're happy, they're stronger, they're more powerful.
Okay.
And so Esther Perel talks about, it's like this whole idea of pleasure and safety.
Mm-hmm.
And safety is in belonging. We're not talking about safety. Will I choke when I'm hanging upside down with a pickle stuck in some part of my body? Yes, we're not necessarily talking about something extreme. We're talking about, I don't like how the odor of my genitalia.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm afraid to tell it to my partner because I don't know if my partner will accept me. What if you say it's like, oh, you're dirty? How will I live with that? What does that mean? We all want to belong.
Yeah, we do.
And as much as we're afraid, and the closer the people are, the more vulnerable we'll be. Because if I go in the street and I meet first person in the street and say, you know what, you don't know me, but I really don't like tongue kissing. And move away. Okay. But going to the person with whom you decided to spend your whole life together and saying, that thing that you do, that by the way you have done for 10 years in bed, I really don't like it.
Yeah.
How do we say that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's easy for us to say, I love you to the moon and back. But when you make scrambled eggs, please let's be light on salt. But when we're in bed to say, when you play with my nipple, I really like it when you do it intensely later on when I'm warmed up. But before warm up, let's go a little bit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When I ask my clients, can you say it to each other? They look at me as I'm from another planet. What do you mean? Of course, no.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of a conversation I'm gathering around liberation. And when you're working with a couple, specifically around, sex or challenges around sex or just intimacy in general, how do you help them kind of debunk some of these myths or just even recognize that they have some false understanding or some, shame? How do you do that as a sex therapist with a couple that's coming in to see you?
So one of the things that I'll say as a sex therapist is a therapist who doesn't get distracted by sex. Yes, you probably heard, Sarah, if you, like I said, if you were in my class, you probably heard me say that. Yes. It's more than likely my not conversations is not about what body part goes into one orifice and what music to put or how many candles to put around in order to create an atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
My conversations is, what is sex for you?
Yeah.
When you say you want more sex, what is it that you want more of?
Okay.
What kind of conversations do you have about sex? Basically, so in general, so there are a lot of techniques. There is a lot of things that we explore. But more than anything, I want to expand their perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that when people come to me, they come to me, especially to sex therapists. Yes, they come, when they tried or they believe that they tried everything.
Mm-hmm.
Going to the stranger, I'm very aware that you're going to a person whom you met for the first time. And one of the questions it's like if it's intimacy or sex or sexual discrepancy is a topic, 15, 20 minutes into meeting, we're talking about how often are you sexual and when you're sexual, what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that you want more of?
Yeah.
When I go to the restaurant and I don't like the food and the waiter is rude and the music is loud and the chairs are uncomfortable, the next time when someone says, hey, let's go to that restaurant, and I say I don't want to, do I have common sense or do I have desire issue?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, for example, it's like talking about those myths. People believe that we don't need to talk about sexuality. It has to come naturally. And actually, I did a presentation. It was in Europe where I was talking to the Ministry of Health in one of the former Soviet Union countries, and I said I did an analogy. It's like when, and it was a country who really promotes first the wedding night. And I said, it's like when people they haven't talked to each other, they haven't touched each other at all. The pressure of parading sheets with blood next morning, it sounds like it's a lot of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And I said an analogy, it's like, when I got the computer for the first time, it looked very complicated. I was happy that I could pull up the screen, the internet, and it's like, and it did something. It's like, oh my goodness, and it worked.
Yeah.
I said, it's the same with sexuality. We want to start, let's make it a wedding month where they get to touch each other, feel each other, know how they feel being touched. We don't know what we like, what we don't like till we get into the situation. And I said, it's like it takes time. Now when I have time and experience with the computer, when I sat with the IT people who told me what to do, and one of the men stand up and said, it's like you didn't get it right. This is different because sex is natural. Mm-hmm. We don't need to talk about it. We don't need to learn about it. And for me, sex is like everything else in life, only we do it in the dark with eyes closed and not talking about.
That's true.
Society. So that's another aspect of sexuality that is different. We can see what cars people drive. We can see what kind of philosophies, parenting philosophies people have. We can see their relationship with money. We may not know their budget sheet. We can see what cars they drive. We can see what restaurants they go. We can see what clothes they wear. We have no idea what people do behind closed doors. Or for that matter, open doors. Because for some people who enjoy having risk, it's like they may be going, we have no idea where in our proximity where people are sexual, whatever that sexual means. Mm-hmm. Sometimes a given look in the crowded room can be more erotic, can be more charged, can be more influential than the whole night of lovemaking.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about something very, very abstract. Yes, and even when you ask the question, when we talk about intimacy, when we talk about sex, when we talk about sexuality, what is it that we're talking about? Are we talking about penis-vagina intercourse? Because when we take it away from penis-vagina intercourse, missionary position, we have the rest of the world open up to us.
Yeah.
And that's overwhelming, and that's confusing, and that's uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And when it's uncomfortable, we want to rein it all in. And not for ourselves. Then we go to, again, we live in the society where somehow we believe that we have more power in telling people what to do and what not to do with their bodies sexually than we have in many other areas in life. Again, right now for example, right now we're in a very ambiguous situation. Yes, ambiguous in many, many ways. Mm-hmm. I would dare saying that in sexuality, we have lived in that place for a long time. Mm-hmm. We were raised by people, by the generation that didn't have to talk about sexuality as much, because before birth control, we didn't have reliable ways how to have sexual pleasure without having a very high long-term risk involved. When birth control was created, sexual life totally changed, but we never caught up to it. And we're still struggling with the same thing. What is our comfort level with people with the same gender being in the relationship? Of that, more than 90% of that relationship is similar to the relationship that all of us have. Mm-hmm. Yet we focus on those few percent of time when people do something sexually that's different and uncomfortable for us.
And I wonder too, Dr. R, about just subjectively knowing yourself and where you feel comfortable with sex in your own body. Because if you're not comfortable with yourself and, different areas of your body, knowing your vagina, knowing your penis, all of those different things, men, it's more acceptable for masturbation, whereas women, it's more taboo to do that. And so I feel like, and this is just my own perspective from it, that a lot of women, they go into relationships and they don't even really know themselves sexually, who they are and what they want. Because I think, and this can even be for same sex couples, any of it, but I think it can be really empowering to know yourself, because then you know what you need from your partner, whoever that may be. But you also have to be comfortable in doing that. And like you said, a lot of people are not comfortable. And I also think women are just more complex in how we orgasm versus how men can orgasm. And I imagine when you are talking with clients, that you've probably had lots of women that have never even orgasmed before, and they didn't even really know until you've really experienced it. I don't think you realize like what you're really missing out on. And so if your partner doesn't know, and then if you have a partner who thinks they're giving you an orgasm, but they're not, I mean, there's so many different layers, and it all goes into shame, and it all goes into, we're not going to talk about this. We're just, going to move forward, all of those things. But if you don't know yourself and you don't know or have never experienced it and no one's talked to you about it, how do you help those clients? Like, how would you say to somebody like to tap into their sexuality?
That's a good question.
You said one word that stood out for me. Yes, it's like we have to be comfortable talking about sexuality. I would say we have to do it even when we're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right now, we're living in this society where we're becoming more and more averse to discomfort. We're more and more averse to that contrast of leaning into something that we really are uncomfortable with. Like right now is actually, again, in the whole society, we're seeing this. Yes, it's like things are shifting, and we're noticing how uncomfortable we are and how threatening and frightening it is. It's terrifying for parents to let their kids to school because we don't know about shooting, for example. And here people get to practice conversations. They talk to each other. They hear it on the radio. There are times to practice something. So Sarah, what do I tell my clients is, yes, it is uncomfortable, and it will be uncomfortable, and you'll be clumsy in it because this is new. We have not. So talking about masturbation, yes, talking about self-pleasing. It's not, before we're talking about how to organize time and room for you to explore self-pleasing, we want to explore, what does self-pleasing mean to you? What are the narratives that you live? What are the memories that you have? Oh, the memory that I had. Yes, it's like, it's like something felt good. I started to rub on the pillow, and my parent walked up and they said, "Oh my goodness, what you're doing?" Yes, we know it's not what you say, it's how you react.
Yes.
And somehow, somewhere, then we learned, so we learned self-doubt. We learned to doubt ourselves. Another thing that it becomes, we don't like to be uncomfortable. We also don't like when we're not an expert in something. We don't like the feeling of doing something that we're not good at yet. So part of my work is really normalizing the process. Of course you're uncomfortable. Of course you don't know what to do. First of all, we're living in this schizophrenic society where everything that is sexual sells, but don't dare talking about it.
Yeah, that's true.
We live in the society where we mix what is fiction, what is documentary. We're looking at sexual explicit material as documentary, where it's unusual people with unusual bodies doing unusual things in unusual circumstances. When we watch LeBron play, shouldn't probably use like right now in Texas the basketball analogy.
It's too soon.
It's too soon. Yes, it's too uncomfortable. It's a change. It's too uncomfortable. But we don't expect that we will do the same things in our core, in our gym. We know that we're different. With sexuality, we don't know. So that lack of information creates these expectations. So more than anything, like, when we look in sexuality, we have a implicit model. Implicit model, it's a way that you organize how to work with sexuality. And implicit, so P means permission, and LI, then implicit means limited information. Before we go to intense therapy, it's permission to talk. So for some couples, they literally, they talk before they come in. It's like, well, we knew that we had a session with you tomorrow, so we knew you told us to talk about it, so we had to sit and talk about it. Because where do you have the momentum? Where do you find the room to invite someone to talk about something? Then your shame comes in. And the standards are, anytime when do we look at what is what is sex addiction? A lot of times sex addict is a person who wants sex one time more than their partner. Or, when we talk about sexuality, pay attention to it. It's so easy for us to talk about sexuality that creates pain. We're very passionate about children being sexually abused. Yes, one child sexual abused is one child too many. Absolutely. Absolutely. And us focusing on talking just on this one aspect, how much do we help ourselves and kids? I don't know. Do we need to focus on it? Absolutely. How we do with this imbalance of talking about pain and pleasure? Do an experiment. Bring up topic of sexuality anywhere you go. You'll notice that people will move to, it's like, and this is what happens when you get abused. Or I know someone who was abused. Or we then go to the affairs. Affairs, one of the other conversation, yes, like it's one of the myth is that affair is a linear event. A caused B. No, it's much more complex. But we don't want to look at complexity. Yes, it's giving time. It's prioritizing. One Sarah's like one of the questions that I'll ask my clients is, if you were, sexuality is what you want. Yes, it's intimacy, closeness. Sexuality is what you want, and this is your project. If you had a project at work that you had the same attitude, the same motivation, you put the same effort that you put in the sexuality project at home, how successful would you be at projects at work?
Yeah.
They know the answers.
Yes.
If we keep sexuality out there at something different, we have an excuse not to go there. Once we recognize that just like money, just like health, just like traffic, just like sex is one part of our lives. And when we try to create a separate set of skills to work with it, we'll always have an excuse why we're not doing well. We know creating new skills is much more different than transferring skills that we have. So Sarah said, what part of what I do is help people see that sex is no different, or intimacy is no different than everything else. Only you do it in the dark with your eyes closed and never talking about it.
Yeah.
Turn those lights on. Turn the lights on, guys. Turn the lights on. Turn the lights on. Turn them on.
It's not necessary. For example, if you like lights closed, sometimes fine. Do you always eat the same breakfast? Do you?
No.
What if you lived life having to eat, being committed to eat exactly the same thing every single day? What would be your relationship with it?
Boring.
Yeah. Look at Cindy's face. I don't know if you guys see it.
Cindy's like, yeah.
Yes. Super boring. Rigid.
Now, imagine
very rigid
place where you're married and your spouse is eating the same meal every single day, and you don't want to, and it's like, first day it's okay, second day it's okay, third day it's like, well, it's kind of not okay, but you don't want to ask your newlyweds. It's like, how will I ask about it? Because it's like, well, it's like there is this whole myth that women are nagging, so I will not nag. If they may, like, regardless of who is the partner, yes, it's the same. Regardless, it's two humans coming together. So we create a narrative in our head to make sense of it. Because we don't want to risk. We don't want to take a risk, because if I risk, I get exposed. And I'll say, well, now I married someone who doesn't like a breakfast the same way. Whatever it is. Yes?
Yeah.
And when we don't talk about it, now it becomes a thing. Now when one of you brings it up, another can say, how is it that you're bringing it up now? And I was like, well, you never bring anything else up. And now we're not talking about breakfast. We're talking about everything else except breakfast.
Yeah. I have a question. Do you find it more difficult for men or women to be more open about sexuality? Like, are men more open to wanting to be like, yeah, let's do it, let's try this? Or do you find that women are more open? Like, who do you find more open when you're having sessions with all that?
Sarah, I would say we are more similar than we're different. And I think we want to hold on to differences as the way to have some grounding. We all want to be loved. We all want to be cared for. We all want to be accepted. We all want to belong. We're afraid of rejection. We're afraid of being misunderstood. We're afraid of being different. We're afraid of being rejected. It's similarities creates room for vulnerability, and we don't want that. So
That's
keeping
good.
those distances, yes, you probably heard me say, it's like that labels are for jars, they're not for people. We're much more complex as people. To have one label define the complexity of who we are. If we look at statistically, if we look at as the general, yes, are male usually like a little bit, their bell curve is moved a little bit towards more being maybe more a little bit more open, maybe a little bit, yes, maybe a little bit, yes, societally from the young age, yes, it's like it's an evolutionary, yes, for males their genitalia is outward, for females it's more inward, males touch themselves more just to begin with, just going to the bathroom, yes, they develop a different relationship. As a society, we have more we give more leverage to men than we give to women, absolutely. So there is some, but not as much as we believe that it is.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I had couples, I had same-sex couples where one part, with the desire discrepancy. So desire discrepancy, I would say it's one of the more complicated things to work through, especially when there is not much trauma history and when people like each other. It's like, so there are 3 ways how to fix or how to work with sexual desire discrepancies. No one knows what those 3 things are. Yes.
What are they?
No one knows.
I thought you were holding the answer.
Cindy's like, tell me now.
Tell me now. We're here to crack the code.
I need to know these things now.
Because what desire is, it's so much.
Subjective.
It's like It's so subjective, yet we try to make it very objective and very concrete.
Yes. I love concrete. I think that's why this is so hard sometimes. Yes, I want to be able to name it.
So you like concrete and you like right or wrong.
I do.
Yeah, very dichotomous way. Yes, it's very sexist.
Show me art that is concrete and predictable and right.
That is true. And it makes me think too, Dr. R, in the sex class when we were in Santa Fe. Yeah, I guess it was Taos. Yeah. And we were not in that class, but we got to go to like the show of the sex class, and they all got to like paint and draw their vagina.
Yes.
And I thought that was like the coolest thing ever. It was like very Georgia O'Keeffe.
Yeah.
And I was like, how cool is that to like, it's so personal, it's so raw, but you're putting it out there and really having to like, I guess, look at yourself, like really see yourself.
Attractiveness of yourself.
Yeah. And the beauty that is you, that makes you unique in a way that is also very safe to me, it feels like, because it's, you're not like, naked and like posing in front of people for an art class or something like that.
Sure.
But you are able to connect with yourself in a very vulnerable place. Nobody knew who anybody's was. And you were able to really, look at yourself from a very vulnerable state. And I just thought that was, so when you said art, it just clicked for me. But I just thought that was such a beautiful way to explore sexuality as a woman. So, but you're right. Art is messy. Art is not, it's very fluid. It's not concrete. It's different colors, different layers. It's, and same with genitalia and human body and all of it.
Yeah. Sexuality.
There has to be some tension. There has to be some tension for it, for to explode, for it to get hot. It's like we have to lean into it.
Yeah.
It's not that we live in the society where we believe that sex is indecent. No, we don't have decent language to talk about. Sex is as natural part of, we're all consequences of sex, of 2 people getting together.
Yeah.
Or people figuring out the way how to put parts of us into the petri dish to create them.
Yeah. Yeah. Can we go back to the desire discrepancy for a second? Because it got me thinking about a book that I'm reading right now by Emily Nagoski called Come As You Are. Have you ever heard of that?
I love that book. She also has a fantastic workbook that comes with that book.
Okay. Well, we had her sister on the podcast actually talking about something totally unrelated, but I was working, and listen, disclaimer, I'm not a sex therapist. And so I might have been a little in over my head, but I was working with a particular couple and we were talking about brakes and accelerators and what are the things that, basically turn you on, and does your partner know that? And what are the things that could kind of hit the brakes a little bit? Is that what you're talking about when you're talking about desire discrepancy? Or did I miss the mark?
So just to give a model, so you're talking about Emily Nagoski in her book Come As You Are.
Yes.
And in this, she describes the dual control model.
Right.
Dual control model that she describes not only about sexuality, but about everything else, that we have inhibitors and exciters.
Yes.
Yes. There are things that excite us, and there are things that suppress our excitement about anything and about everything. Yeah. So, for example, for me, cleanliness, it's important. If I go to the store, if I go to, there was a yoga studio in Fort Worth that I went to, it didn't look clean. For me, that's an inhibitor. I was laying down, and instead of relaxing and thinking about breathing in, I was looking at the dust and thinking all the dust that I'm breathing in.
Right.
So there are things, there are times that there is another studio that I like the person. For me, that's an exciter. I like the person, I like her personality. So we have the same exciters and inhibitors in sexuality. So this is one of the ways how to address it. When I talk about sexuality in desire discrepancy in general, it's more of wanting, thinking, orienting yourself, looking for ways of how to create sexual moments with your partner. And for some people, they think about it, it occupies, I'm making it up, yes, 80% of their mental real estate. For some people, literally, they'll even say it's like, I think about it only because I know you think about it.
Yeah.
Yes, we have people who have asexual, they actually even interpret themselves as that. And if you're in the couple where people want sex once a year, both of them, it's not a problem. If you're in the couple where you want to be sexual 2-3 times a day and both of you want the same, it's not a problem. It's when you want different.
Yeah.
And we have those discrepancies with everything. Different people want different amount of kids. Some people like Chinese food. Some people like Italian food. Some people want to buy expensive cars. Some people like to budget. We have those discrepancies in many, many areas in life that we work through, we navigate. With discrepancies in sexuality, what happens? We attach meaning.
Yeah.
If you loved me, you would want more sex.
Okay.
You would get more excited. There is something that you're not into me. So when we don't talk about it, one of the side effects or unintended consequences that happens is our desire, our sexuality, our desire for intimacy, for connection. It's very fluid. There is not a single tax accountant person who is sexual on April 14th, unless being sexual gives them gives them energy to continue doing it, to continue working on whatever you're working on. So I'm not saying that it's always this way or not. People have a very different relationship with sexuality, but it's like when menopause comes in. Yes, when your lubrication becomes more like water, less than honey. So this idea of, if you really were more into me, you will like it more. No, when you're taking some medicine dries your body out.
Yeah.
So when it dries your sinuses, it dries your vaginal area as well. The body is systemic.
Yeah.
And sex is like air. When we have it, we don't worry about it at all. But when we don't have enough of it, it becomes the center of our world.
Yeah.
So in that discrepancy, it may be very small discrepancy to begin with, but that gap is intensified. One of the questions, for example, I'll ask my clients is, for a person who has more desire, how often do you invite your partner to be sexual when you know that the answer will be no?
Wow. It goes back to that vulnerability thing. And feeling shame when you're rejected and shutting down and kind of creating that story.
So, yes. And Cindy, there's another thing. When I ask you and you say no, I am counting those no's as that towards you, towards me. So then I can go back and say, no, it's like I asked you 5 times and you said no. When will you say yes?
Yeah.
It actually is used. So that's another thing. So now, it's like when we're doing it in the dark with our eyes closed and never talking about it. Let's add one more point. Anytime you have more than one, it's a system and there is a power dynamic.
Yeah.
Anytime there is more than one, there is power dynamic. So, for example, when you are in your relationships, yes, when there is one tie, I want to go to watch a movie, I need to sit at home and work. When it's one tie, how do you break the tie?
How do you break the tie?
Well, that's the question. So that's the question that I posed to you in the room.
Yeah.
Yes, that's how we're discussing. Our whole country's democracy is built on checks and balances. We have on every level, we have a way, a system, how to break a tie.
Yeah.
Families don't. They stumble into it one way or another. When sex becomes something, sexuality becomes something that it is this big, because the idea is for a person who has lower desire, in their mind, I'll die never having it. There is this urgency, existential urgency. And for another person, then becomes, doesn't matter how much I give, it's never enough.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I also think too, though, it can be, I know we were just talking about you're feeling the rejection, asking your partner to be sexual, but then on the other side of it, maybe your partner needs emotional, connection and emotional support in the home. Like as a mom, like you need your partner to step up and help with some things at home. And so then, the only control you do have is I'm exhausted. I've been touched all day. By my children. I've all of these different things. So then you're just, it's kind of playing like tit for tat, right? You keep going back and forth because no one's really on the same page. Whereas someone might need more of the emotional where someone else needs the physical, but you're both extremely, carrying the weight of different things and it's not even. And so then that builds that resentment in as well. And so that can be where, one partner could shut things down from the other partner. And I know that that's going into a whole nother situation, but I think on the other side too, you can feel like, well, you expect this from me. I'm already doing all of this over here. I'm tired. Like, I don't know if that makes sense.
It's, so it's like, and for example, so when you say I am tired, then it can be, so for example, let's have bisexual. No, not today. No does not have to be the end of the conversation, but most of the time it is, because there are hurt feelings and people close off and go continuing bleeding with their own wounds. Versus, hey, are you in the mood to goof around in bed? Really, I'm very tired. Well, I hear that you're very tired. I feel very lonely and I feel very vulnerable. Is there anything else we can do? I want to touch you. I want to connect to you. Okay, it's like, let's sit down and let's talk about it. It's like, I like the idea of you touching me right now just feels averse. I love you to the moon right back. And right now, if you touch me and I agree to it, I would be going against myself. And I think, and which people do. That's another question that I ask. How often are you sexual when you don't want to?
Okay.
Because sometimes it's easier to say yes. So what we say yes to, there is short-term intense pain or discomfort and long-term chronic discomfort. A lot of times we will give in whatever we are doing to minimize the short-term intense discomfort, but we sign up for chronic disappointment. When I say yes to sex when I don't want to, I'm inviting you to break my boundaries, to cross my boundaries. So basically, I'm allowing you to violate me. My nervous system will have effect on it, will have reaction to it. So then it's anger, there is resentment. Then I don't feel respected. Then I don't feel seen. Then I don't feel, it's like, oh, even if I give this, then I expect that you'll give more of this here. And then you don't give me as much here, or you don't even notice what I gave you, that it is, how valuable it is, what it gave you. It's like, it's not even enough for you.
Yeah.
And we're moving further away. And learning, what do I do with couples in therapy? Yes, it's like one thing that I'm looking at for me visually. I see two people who are really at the same place. They want to be loved. They want to be connected. They want to understand and be understood. They want to be a decent human being.
Yeah.
I'll ask my couples, it's like, so when you got up, like this morning, like when your partner got up this morning, when do you think they decided, you know what, I'll make sure that I'll make my partner's life as miserable as possible?
Yeah.
Decent partner, a decent worker, a decent colleague, and I want it. And then we stepped into the cat's pee, the child threw up, the dishwasher broke, the handyman didn't come in, and we have a flat tire.
And then your husband slaps your ass and you're like, I've had it today.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Repellent.
You're like, can we?
With me?
No, I mean, like, seriously though, it's like that, all those things. And then there's that, and
there's a bid for connection, and it's
and you're like,
not.
Can you clean up the throw up, or can you put some clothes in the dryer?
That would be an accelerator. That would be an accelerator.
It would.
I think.
When people had this language.
It would.
So this is where that language, it's like makes sense. It's like, when you're really whining like this, it inhibits me. Yes, when you come and you tell me the 15th time, I heard you. And actually, every time you ask me when you know that the answer is no, I feel shitty.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to say no to you. But right now, this is the environment. This is the context within we are at.
Yeah. Right. So I'm curious, Dr. R, for listeners that might be feeling kind of disconnected in their relationships, whether that be on a sexual level or just in passing in day-to-day life, right? And maybe they're not familiar with sex therapy. Maybe they didn't even know that was a thing, right? What would you tell them? Like, where do we start? How do we start to reconnect on a deeper level if this has become kind of the cycle, the pattern that we're living in?
I think, first of all, recognizing that we're in the cycle. Recognizing and giving yourself compassion. We are in the world that does not promote or does not leave a lot of room for us to prioritize relationships. We prioritize efficiency, and intimacy is not efficient. It's the opposite of it. So that would be my first part. Yes, it's like recognizing it sucks. It will not happen naturally. It will not happen easy. It's not something that we will just fall into. The second part, I would say, it's being curious. Instead of judgmental, recognizing that we have this dichotomy of judgment and curiosity. The more unsafe we are, the more unsafe we feel, the more uncomfortable we feel, the more we go into judgment. The more open we are, the more we'll go into curiosity. When we are curious, we are open to learn about other people. Yes?
Yeah.
Another aspect, being playful. One of our problems is we take life way too, as my mentor used to say, we take life too darn seriously.
Yes, we do.
We do. We think
do.
highly about ourselves. We think that everyone thinks about us. We think that, in sexuality, if sex is done right, it's messy. There are liquids flying, there are sweat flying, there is, mascara all over the place. You put your head, you get on the hair, ouch, you're on my hair. Okay, get off my hair. Hold on, I need to go to the bathroom. Is that possible? Okay, well, we'll come back and we'll get, ouch, my back. It's like I worked out. Oh, my muscle is cramping. Okay, well, here's the banana. Banana to eat for potassium, not, banana for
but you know, no judgment. Look,
I was thinking for nutrients, but we can think about something else. Yes,
use it for both. You could use it.
Absolutely. But laughing. Like, for example, I'll ask, how often do you laugh when you're sexual?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I cannot tell you how many people will say it's like, oh, no, like, no, well, it's like, do you laugh in other areas in life? Of course.
Yeah. Why is this so serious? Why does this have to be so serious? And then also, you think about how culture has really served it up on a platter to us. What do we consume? We see movies where it's just intense and everything's so serious and perfect and right. It's not reality.
When I have flaccid penises, there is no dry vaginas. There is no hanging bellies. If I am, say if my partner asks me, let's change the position, and my only thought is like, oh, you'll see my big butt and my hanging belly. That's what I'm focusing on. Talking about inhibitors.
Mm-hmm.
Also recognizing that with this idea of inhibitors and exciters, we own it.
Yeah.
We can turn ourselves on. We can turn ourselves off. There is a limit to how much we can do it. Yes, we cannot overcome all the adversities that we have, all the negative thoughts. But we have power. We have agency in exhibitors and in exciters and inhibitors.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I would say, talk, recognizing that it's difficult to talk. This is where we come in. Yes, this is where therapist comes in. You don't have to have a therapy as intervention when things are wrong. A therapy can be for prevention. Mm-hmm. Having the third person in the room to break the cycle of not talking can be all that clients need in order to start a conversation. And it's not one conversation is the same as the sex talk. It's not one conversation. It's ongoing conversation.
Yes.
Esther Perel talks about that sex can be a thing you do or a place you go. Yes. So in order for it to be a place you go, we have to embrace uncertainty, embrace messiness, and be curious to excitement.
Yeah. And I think the catalyst to that is just feeling safe with who you're with. Mm-hmm. To share that.
And actually, before that, feeling safe
with yourself.
Who you are.
Yes.
Before that.
And then with your partner as well, because I think once you have that space, the sky's the limit with what you can share, because it's not, like you have to go scream from the rooftops to everybody. We're into this. We like to do this. You don't have to go and tell all your friends about it, but I think being open and vulnerable, there's such a freeing, unmasking part of that within mm-hmm. the safety of like you and your partner. And it's kind of like sexy and seductive of like you two knowing like what you're into and what you do together. And it's like your special thing. I think that there's something really empowering about that as a couple as well.
As long as you embrace it first.
Yes.
If I don't embrace it and I come to you asking you to embrace it, even when you embrace it, it doesn't mean that you will receive it. So here is one more point to add to, it's like when you ask this, like, what else, what do I teach couples? Or how do I work mm-hmm. with couples is when someone asks for something, I don't necessarily, in relationship with a partner, I don't necessarily assume that their receptors are open to receive what they want. Mm. So there is receiving and there is transmission. And sometimes, yes, I want you to connect to me. I see the partner connecting and I see this partner closing up and not taking it in. Well, now you're connecting to me when she asks. What about you connecting when she doesn't ask? Or the way you're connecting is not enough. So it's both and it starts within everything. Always starts within us. And having the courage to come and say, it's like, you know what? I don't know what to say to you. I feel lost. It's the most vulnerable, the most connecting, and the most scary thing.
But I feel like it's also extremely rewarding when you get to that safe space for yourself and with someone else on a level that is just very intense, but in a way that is freeing. So I think that it's just probably a very cool place to get, but it's hard to get there with the way that our society is, with the way we're kind of set up. to talk about
This is
it.
what you do with parents and children. You're a child therapist, yes?
Yes.
As a society, we have some messages about how to raise children that are not necessarily the most efficient way for children.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You are sitting with your parents in the room, helping them lean into something that they're uncomfortable with, that feels counterintuitive to them, letting them know that there is another world outside there.
Yep.
Am I wrong in that?
Exactly. And the shame goes into parenting. Huge. It's all shame is really, Cindy and I talk about all the time. Shame carries so much weight on so many different relationships, on so many different things in life. And it's, I think breaking that catalyst that really changes everything. If you can do that, break that shame cycle, but that's very difficult to do.
Even recognize, it is shame to recognize that you're in the shame cycle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Shame looks very different for different people.
Mm-hmm.
Us assuming that we know that people are aware that they're in the shame cycle, it's a false predicament.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Wow.
Having this conversation today, well, two things I want to say. First of all, it just makes me want to go back and be a grad student all over again, maybe without the heavy lifting.
Can Cindy and I come sit in the
Can we
sex
just
class?
come sit in your sex class, please?
I'm sure you can.
Oh my gosh.
Sure
Let's do it.
I just absolutely, Sarah.
Can we come when you have special guests? I always heard about your special guests. I want to come to those.
You don't want me, you want special guests.
Well, we want Dr. R with her special guest friends.
That's right. We want both. No, I think this conversation today has just, it's just made me realize again, and it's a reminder of just how grateful we are to know you, to have had some of your classes. And secondly, would you be willing to come back in the future and talk to us more about these different aspects?
Of course I would.
Oh my gosh.
Dr. R, we just love you.
I want to promote. For me, it's I get to enjoy the work that you're doing. Being an educator, one of the reasons that we are educators is we want to see people go in the world and find their own selves and make the difference in the way that they're passionate about. So watching the two of you, it's like, as well as you get along together and watching how you play with each other and watching you make a difference in the world. Yeah. If there is a small way that I can contribute, absolutely.
This has been so great.
I know.
And I could talk to you all day about this, honestly. I mean, we didn't get to all of our questions, of course, but that's okay. Well, it's just an invitation to come back and talk more with us about this.
I did tell you in the beginning.
Yes.
Monitor me. If you need me to stop,
no, I love it.
The directions, but I'll go.
I love it.
This is why we love you, Dr. R. You just go with the flow.
Yeah.
And you never know where it's going to take you. And it usually is to an even cooler place than you could have imagined.
Totally.
But that's what creativity and curiosity does.
Yes.
That's what creativity and curiosity
And that's what sex can do too. If you start talking about it.
Absolutely.
Right.
Let's talk about sex, baby.
Let's talk about
sex, baby.
So once you air it out, there will be a lot of people who have permission. Yes, to talk about sexuality. This is what happened with 50 Shades of Grey. It's not the 50 Shades of Grey. It's actually a very poorly written piece of literature. But it gave permission for people to have it on their coffee table and talk about it.
Yeah.
So you're doing this by you inviting me, by you choosing to talk about sexuality, by you putting it out there. Yes.
Yeah.
You are showing people, it's like, no, talk about sex is the same as talking about cars or taxes. It's uncomfortable.
Except it's more fun.
But it's doable.
It's more fun to talk about than taxes and cars.
It's true, in my opinion.
Dr. Davis talks, when we do Pony Days, we introduce and we say, people have a relationship with work and people have a relationship with sex. So only like Dr. Davis says, he's like they spend more time working. Well, but sex is more fun to talk about.
She's not wrong.
Yeah.
Well, we love you. We're so appreciative of you, and just everybody. Just thanks for listening.
I know. Thanks for being here, Dr. R. You're the best. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, guys. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If this podcast resonated with you, it would mean so much to us if you'd be willing to take a few minutes of your time and do a couple of things. First, can you please follow or subscribe to the Unmasking podcast? This is helpful for you because you'll never miss an episode. So to do this, go to the Unmasking podcast show page on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and tap the plus sign in the upper right-hand corner or click follow. While you're there, if you'd be willing to give us a 5-star rating and share an episode that you loved with a friend, we would be so grateful. The Unmasking podcast is created and hosted by Cindy Payne and Sarah Vaught. And you can also find more information by logging on to our website, theunmaskingpodcast.com. There you will see opportunities to subscribe as well as apply to be a guest on our show. As always, we're so grateful for you, and we hope you join us next week for a new episode. Thank you.